Good afternoon. My name is Gerald Hankerson, Gerald Hankerson. I am the president of the Seattle-King County NAACP branch. Today we're here to talk about the recent police-involved shooting of Mr. Che Andre Taylor. Obviously, our community is outraged. We have seen the videos, we have read all the reports, we have seen as much as pretty much some of you have actually read, and which of course some of you have actually reported. After looking at the video and seeing all the facts and the things that we determined, the Seattle-King County NAACP declared this as actually an execution by Seattle Police Department of a man without even giving him a due process or ability to be seen before a jury of his peers. This was cold-blooded murder. Let me repeat, cold-blooded murder executed by Seattle Police Department on Sunday morning at a time when we heard so many conflicting reports about the fact that there was a suspicious car or some type of activities was going on in this community. The police respond, and what we saw was 9 seconds by the time this task force, as I believe, to be moving from their car to move in, and while they was in pursuit of assuming that he was trying to handcuff Mr. Che Taylor, he was gunned down without even given access or an opportunity to even be removed from a place to where he ended up losing his life. It was clear to me that they come with the intent to kill, not to arrest. That you can see from the videos yourself, and I will not belabor it in the minors about what everybody else saw, that what you've seen is the officer giving demands. Raise your hand, get down, and he did exactly as the officer commanded. The question is whether the commands was flawed or not. For a huge 6'2", 6'3", 240-pound man to get down in a car door to make it look like he was entering back into a car, which was not his car, and then to be approached by 2 armed officers, one with a shotgun, and gun him down. To us, it looked like he almost jeopardized shooting the officer that looked like he was moving in for the arrest. My community and the NAACP, we are outraged. How many times are we going to keep on coming down here to talk about how many police officers killing our brothers in the streets like savage animals? At what point is this going to end? At what point is the city going to take responsibility? But let me back up just for 1 second, because I want to first say that the Seattle-King County NAACP first want to just offer our condolences to the Taylor family. I can relate to what they must feel like and how much pain they must be endured. As we as a society have seen this for the past 100 years, even though most prevalently over the past year, we are witnessing our brothers getting gunned down in the street at the hands of police, and all they walk away with is a paid vacation pending investigation. Of course, I actually talked to the police chief myself that night around 1 a.m., and the story that she told me seems to conflict with the things that she's saying today. Her explicit remarks to me that, Mr. Hankerson, that what we know so far is that there was a suspicious car reported in the neighborhood, which of course we know is not one of our neighborhoods, for colored people neighborhood, and which the officers responded, and when they arrived, what happened was they gave commands to Mr. Taylor. He did not obey those commands, and they opened fire, quote unquote. When I asked the chief herself, did Mr. Taylor have a gun? Her words were, one was in reach. Now, I know I got 20/20 vision. I can't speak about many of you, but when I looked at that video, I saw Mr. Taylor put his hands in the air. And then, get down, put your hands up, get down, put your hands up, as if he was confused, but he complied exactly what the officers told him to do, get down, which he did. The next part is when the fires were shot and he was gunned down, executed, is where now the police is saying that he reached for a weapon. And let me add this piece here too, because I'm particularly perplexed with some of you in the media, that you have rushed to judgment before an investigation can even be started, and let alone to be completed. All we've seen is a whole bunch of attempts to call him an armed felon, an armed ex-felon, or whatever you call, you name, that's all you talked about. Then you continuously bring it up as criminal history or whatever transpired in his past after he was trying to poison the community to justify that this man deserved to be shot. So I fault many of you for discrediting him and dehumanizing him away so you can get most of society to feel like, well, maybe he did justify being killed. But let me be clear from the NAACP. that whatever happened, whatever he did in life or wherever he went in life, whatever transpired before that moment happened where the man lost his life is irrelevant to us. What matters to us is you have a process in place called the court of law, and you got police officers supposed to uphold that law, but when the police officer becomes the judge, the jury, and the executioner, this is what is causing, when you're killing so many of our people in the street, and we'll be seeing the political posturing by our city leaders to say before they even seen the video, it looks justified. This is unacceptable. It's unacceptable in America. It is unacceptable in Seattle, and we're not going to take this no more. We're done. We're not taking it no more. We don't want to hear nothing about Department of Justice, because clearly, while they're here, we still seeing our people getting gunned down in the street. We don't want to hear about no other processes. All we want is justice for Che T. We want every single department in the city of Seattle to reuse its resources to find justice for Che Taylor. Now let me make my first announcement. Tonight we're also announcing that the law firm that will be representing ourselves, NAACP, as well as the family, to look into this matter in the inquest hearing, and we're calling on the city of Seattle to make all evidence available. It will be led by James Bible Law Group that includes Dr. Shalise Seacrest and attorney Mr. Charles Swaby. Those would be representatives for the NAACP as well as the family to get to the bottom of this and get to the facts. What we're asking the city of Seattle to do, its police department, its mayor department, its SWAT team, its task force, whomever's associated with law enforcement, to make all evidence available in the interest of your so-called transparency to our legal team who will be investigating this matter on behalf of the NAACP and well as the family. We do not want to see any delays. We do not want to hear any excuses. If you're truly about transparency, you will make all of that information available as soon as asked. So far, only reports I'm hearing is coming from media that's allowing this to perpetuate and build up in society as if somehow this man deserved to die. We cannot allow you to continue doing that. You seem to be a pattern when it comes to media, when it comes to a black man losing his life. The first thing you look for is his criminal history. Stop looking at him as he's a felon and start looking at him as he's a father. Yes. Stop looking at him as he's a gang member or a drug dealer, whatever you want to call it. Start looking at him as he's a son or he's somebody's brother. Yes. It's interesting how this happened when it comes to pattern in our community. I won't be surprised that the autopsy report come back and said he probably smoked some marijuana 10 years ago. That is absolutely irrelevant. Stop demonizing the victim and start holding the right people accountable who executed this man's life on Sunday morning, and you didn't even give him a chance to get his day in court or let society, let the community decide. I'm outraged. And I don't know how long it's going to be before we see this again, but you should be just as outraged as we are. The police sitting at home right now, generating a big check while they're getting their narrative together to respond because they know we are coming. And yes, we are coming. But we hold every single city official accountable, and everybody should be at the table talking about this because this ain't just an NAACP issue. This is our community issue. Yes. This is everybody's issue because tomorrow it could be you or me. There are many people, when you got a percentage of people that has been convicted of felon, every time one get gunned down, you're going to say, oh, we killed the next felon? That's right. The question is, you could have got out 20 years ago, but when are you no longer going to be considered an ex-felon? Stop using that language. Stop referring to him as an ex-felon and call him a man who lost his life on Sunday morning at the hands of police, just like Tamir Rice, just like Michael Brown, just like every other brother, just like Eric Gardner. And now it's on our watch here in Seattle, and the NAACP is not going for it. We're done with this. We're not taking this no more. So I want to let the attorneys, if any question, I don't want to hear nothing about his criminal history. Please do not insult us today by bringing up what took place before Sunday. What we want to talk about is who's accountable, when are they going to be held accountable, and when we're going to get justice for Che Taylor. Right. We don't want to talk about this for another year. I don't even want to talk about it for another week. I want answers. We want answers. And in the interest of being transparent, it's time that the city of Seattle come forward and let us know why you were there. What were you doing there? What was the protocol? Why did you shoot him? Where was the gun? All I've seen so far is a display table of guns and so-called drugs laying on the table. As far as I'm concerned, you could have went and got that out the police supply closet. Exactly. Show me some evidence that it's his, it was on him. What we saw, just like you saw with your own two eyes, and some of you got four, you saw the man raise his hand and follow commands. I do not want to hear no police department say that the man didn't follow orders, because he did. The only problem is maybe the orders was flawed. for a big man to get, they should have at least told him to bag up from the car, something. But they come with the intent to kill, and it was clear that they wanted to kill him. I have nothing else to say. I want to link the floor over to the legal team, James Bible, Shalice Seacrest, and she might answer any of your further questions.
I am James Bible from the James Bible Law Group. My firm will be leading the investigation in relation to this particular case, along with Attorney Shalice Seacrest, who is to my right, and Attorney Christopher Swaby, who is not here at this time. Let me begin by saying that anytime there is a loss of life, anytime that somebody loses a loved one, an entire community needs to take a step back and become reflective. We include the police department in our community. They need to be reflective as well. Unfortunately, rather than evaluating what they could have done better, a slander campaign seems to have been launched. Not an assessment of the issues that might have been present in this particular case, but an assessment of who this person might have been in the future at distant points in time, that I must say is not in accord, is absolutely not in accord with best police practices. Now, I can tell you that it's not in accord with best police practices because I've reviewed this video probably about 500 times, and I've spoken to officers around the country that are involved in internal affairs elsewhere in reference to this particular case. What is shameful here is that there hasn't been a critical evaluation of this video until this point. What has to be acknowledged is that there's an individual that was 6'2" to 6'4", that was approximately a half a foot, maybe a foot away from a car that had an open door, who was clearly told to get down while he was facing the car. So any appearance would have been, logically, that there's a possibility that he would look like he was actually, in fact, going into the car when he was not. One of the questions that we'll have to address here, that all will have to address here, is was Mr. Taylor killed for his compliance? Was he killed because he actually complied with the requests of police? What was he to do? Was he to turn around so that he could actually lay down? Probably not. He would have been shot. What was he to do? Should he have stood there, not moved, and perhaps gotten beaten by the officer for his compliance? Potentially, because he might be alive today. What was he to do? What kind of situations do we have or do we perpetuate when we place people in a spot where following direction creates the perception that they have done wrong that ends up justifying shootings? That is a concern that we have in relation to this case. That is a shooting that all should have in relation to this case. At no point did any officer say, "Sir, back up slowly away from the car." At no point did that occur. We can't ignore that initially they said that this was a suspicious vehicle and that's why they approached. Well, that's inconsistent with reality as well. What we know, having addressed and reviewed these issues in the past, is that those were tactical weapons that were used. And those tactical weapons that are used are often used in different types of operations that aren't simply related to simply approaching a suspicious vehicle. What we know is that not all the officers were in uniform. What was happening here? That's what the attorneys will be seeking to get to the bottom of. And we promise that we will walk with the entire family. We will face the fire with them. We'll face your tough questions and the tough questions of anybody else. We'll also ask tough questions as well. We'll also seek to collect as much information as we possibly can. I think that it's critical to know that we don't believe that this is the only video that was present in this case. We believe that there are other videos that the Seattle Police Department may be holding in reference to this matter. We want those videos. Those videos should be released. We want the extended video. What you've seen is exactly 1 minute perhaps, of video. Now, that 1 minute is particularly telling. If you thought that this was a suspicious vehicle approach, you're wrong. Clearly, that officer is being guided to that specific spot with the intent of a certain arrest. What we need to see, what we absolutely need to see, is the several minutes after. How did the police process this scene? What was happening, what was going on, what pictures were being taken and when, what evidence was actually being gathered either out of a car that was not Mr. Taylor's or any other car, vehicle, or off of any other person. That's information that we simply do not have. We need to see the extended video. Secondly, any interviews that were taken of the alleged civilian witnesses, now I say alleged because we have reports that they're civilian witnesses, but those are from the same entity that has provided us with conflicting information repeatedly over and over again. Their messaging seems to change every 15 minutes. So we need to know whether or not these folks were actually civilian. We deserve the opportunity to have independent interviews of those people so that we can make some assessments of what they saw, what they experienced, what they believe, without the threat of incarceration. Because the threat of incarceration is a fairly big thing when you just witness somebody being shot and killed in front of your face. Evidence. All evidence needs to be reviewed. I understand that there is a firearm review board. I understand that there are people in the police department that claim to review and test evidence. Let me tell you this, and this is present in this sort of circumstance too. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and we're often in a place where entities and individuals seek to prove that they're right, even when the facts suggest that they aren't. There needs to be independent review and investigation of that weapon. It needs to be preserved in such a way where we can assess whether or not DNA, fingerprints, or anything else might be present on that weapon. What is there? In terms of the narcotics, we have questions about that as well that need to be reviewed, would need to be analyzed, need to be seen, we need assistance in being able to determine actually where they came from, whether they were on Mr. Taylor's person or whether they were on somebody else's person or whether they were in a car that again was not Mr. Taylor's. These are questions that we don't yet have the answer to, but conveniently was provided to media in such a way where it creates a perspective that the person is simply a wrongdoer. That the person is simply a wrongdoer and that we should ignore our constitutional requirements to stand up when there's a potential liberty violation. We should just turn our back and forget all of this because here, he has criminal history and here, we think that all of this was present. Well, our judicial system requires so much more. It requires so much more than that. And let's be clear, Che Taylor, if he was doing wrong on that day, it should have been determined in a court of law with a jury of his peers, with an attorney representing him, a judge standing on high, and a prosecutor arguing their case. But we don't have that today. And drug dealing does not equal the death penalty. Perhaps unless you're black, perhaps unless you're young, perhaps unless you're on a side of town where it might be unusual for people to see people that look like you. Use of force reports are critical. We need these use of force reports. It's a responsibility of officers that use force to write up reports and provide those. Police reports are necessary. Standard operating procedure reports are critical. Because this was not simply a suspicious vehicle check, because this was some sort of directed action, there should be some report in relation to what exactly they planned on doing prior to doing it. There should be meeting minutes in terms of their morning staffings. All of those things should enlighten us in reference to exactly what happened in this particular situation. We need documentation of those plans. Call logs to any 911 calls that may have been made. We need to know who it is that actually made 911 calls, because even if it's the police that do the shooting, I would not be surprised if other people called the police. We need to know that information so that we can conduct that review. And I think that it's critical to note that the police can currently control this information. They control it all. They've controlled the investigation to this point. We will do everything that we can to collect information in reference to this matter, and that is exactly why. This is exactly why moments like this, why the Seattle Police Department should not be in charge of the investigation. The King County Prosecutor's Office should not be driving the investigation. We need an independent state agency, probably the State Attorney General's office, to actually be the entity that conducts investigations in reference to police accountability, in reference to police misconduct that could potentially lead to criminal charges. We don't have sufficient separation between the investigators and the investigated in these sort of cases, and that's what we need. Body cameras would tell us so much more in this particular case, so much more. Seattle Police Department and other law enforcement agencies have fought hard to not have body cameras. Not on all, I should say the unions have fought hard to not have body cameras. It's time. It's time. There needs to be legislative changes as well, but at the end of the day, I want everybody to know that the legal team will be walking with the family, that the legal team will be doing everything we can to assist them. Should an inquest be impaneled, we will be the attorneys that represent them, and we will do our best to leave no stone unturned. But please, let's be clear. This did not fit with best practices. We are hiring an investigation firm that has already reviewed the video, a person of which is part of was previously law enforcement, and we're very clear. This was a system failure on behalf of the Seattle Police Department, and the cover-up likely henceforth. And with that, I'll turn it over to Shalice Seacrest. She has any comments.
Attorney Shalice Seacrest.
You want me to move? You want me to
Sure.
move? Okay.
Let's switch.
Yeah, that's quicker.
Attorney Shalice Seacrest. Shlee, S-H-E-L-E-Y. Seacrest, S-E-C-R-E-S-T. To the mother, the brother, the family behind me, we can never bring back Che Taylor. But what we can promise to the family, what we can promise to this community, is that we can bring answers. For the attorneys, we have assembled the greatest team. And I promise you, we will look at every single police report. We will examine every single medical examiner, every autopsy report. We will listen to every single witness. Trust us, and we will be your voice in that inquest proceeding, because there are so many questions that the community has. So many things that happened in a matter of seconds, that the family, that the wife, that the mother, that the brother, that we need to know. This is painful because this is at a time when the community has lost trust in the police department. We need to know that this system is working. We need to examine whether or not all steps were taken to preserve a life that is so much more important than any crime. We are going to make sure that the Seattle Police Department, that they saw Che T, that's what family calls him, Che Taylor, as a man. Because mind you, when it comes to a black person, we do this every time there's a shooting death or a death. They did it to Emmett Till when they accused him of whistling. They did it to Trayvon Martin when they looked through his school records from his absenteeism to what was in his backpack. They did it to Eric Gardner. They did it to Mike Brown. We will not allow that to happen to Che T. Taylor. We will get the answers. Right now, we are going to inspect the police officers. We'll look into their criminal history. We'll find out what they did that Sunday. We want answers, and we promise this community, we promise the family that we will not stop until every single question has been asked and answered. Thank you. Do you want us to sit here?
I'll just switch the mic.
Yeah.
let's
Stand up. You get 'em.
slide over there.
You want to sit down, please?
Well, Mom, you want to sit down, Mom? You sure?
You can sit right here.
All right. Well, I guess this is the question and answer
Well, go ahead.
part. All right. Well, my name is R.I.P Taylor. I'm Shay's older brother. I love them so very much. I've talked to the media yesterday, a few media outlets, and I explained to them that, you know, initially when I heard about it, I live in Los Angeles, and of course it was devastating. You know, I was frantic, you know, as anyone who loves someone would be. You know, I don't think that story is exotic, as I say, rare. I think anybody can relate to a loss of anybody that you love and what that would do to you, you know, how devastated one would be. And so I was devastated. But I'm here now to find some justice for my brother. I saw the video, and of course I was distraught by it, but if I can be transparent with you, I wasn't shocked. I wasn't shocked because you see this happening all over this country. And as of late, other Americans outside of Black Americans are seeing what we've been seeing for many, many years. We've seen it in our community for hundreds of years. And it just so happens that at this time we have the technology that our cameras can show some of the things to the rest of the world that we've been experiencing. So I wasn't shocked that they would get out and, in my perspective of things, kill my brother. Yes, they did have on tactical uniforms and assault rifles. And I think that it appeared to me that they were coming to kill something, and I think they met their objective. They were in unmarked cars, and we know, and per what I heard when I was in Los Angeles from the chief saying that the reason and what happened was there was a suspicious car that they were following. And, you know, I think one of the worst things that happens, you know, in our society is that when a tragedy happens like this, the police has the opportunity to set the narrative, you know. And for a long time, they've been trusted amongst most Americans, not as much in our communities. But when you have an opportunity to set the narrative, and the media, who trust the police, who've had relationship with them, spin that narrative without actually giving us due process or giving us the opportunity to have a different story, it's hard to dig out of that mountain of that narrative. You're swarmed because the power of the media and the authority of the police. And so this is the process that we are in right now, digging out of a narrative that was placed forward that has always been in this country. You know, someone says, well, you know, he had a criminal record. Maybe he did. And but we see around the country that doesn't always, that's not the situation always, because Tamir Rice was a little boy. So we see that even though there's always an excuse of why one should be shot. There's always an excuse, you know. And I told one of the news people yesterday that, you know, it's really not a black story. It's really an American problem. And what gives me some type of hope is that even though mostly black people are affected by this, that there are a lot of white Americans that are standing up with us all over this country. And that makes me feel a little support, and I appreciate that. Now, of course, when you go through things, you lash out and you have distaste in your mouth. And if you're not careful, you can begin to despise all white people. Not me in general, but viewing the troubles over the years, it could make you feel that way. But when you see white people, white Americans, that are standing in truth and standing for some of the injustices that we see, it makes your heart feel good. So I'm happy about that. I love my brother. I know that you guys don't know him, but I can tell you a little bit about him. I loved him. He had $1 million smile, and he had a major, beautiful, big heart. He would help anybody. And yes, he did 22 years. And when he got out, I explained to somebody, it takes a process. Having a redemptive story takes a process. It doesn't happen overnight. After being in a condition of 22 years in a place that makes you think differently about things, makes you operate differently than being in the free world. So when you get out, it takes a process. You just don't automatically become who the police must have thought he should have been. Perfect. And I said yesterday, if the criteria for a man's life to live in the police eyes is for a man to be perfect, then I guess only the police will be alive. I mean, they consider themselves perfect. If that is indeed the criteria, So I'm going to open it up for any questions, but I just wanted to share my thoughts about the situation. I'm here to go to war. I'm here to go to war, and get, of course, no physical war, but nevertheless, I'm here to go to war, and I will be unrelenting to get justice for my little brother.
Just for the question.
All right. You want to switch seats with me?
Yeah.
All right.
Did we introduce you? This is Che Taylor's wife, Brenda, by the way. Deeply hurt. I received a call from her 7 o'clock in the morning on Monday. I knew something was wrong based on the tenor of her voice. I knew something had changed forever for her. I know of the things that she does to try to help people. I know how she has tried the best to lead her life, and I know how much Che meant to her. So as part of this narrative, it should be understood that there are broken family members. Their heart goes with him, and at this stage, they have nothing left but to seek justice and answers as well. And so here she is. Here she is. Are there any questions? If there are no questions, we'll go home.
Mr. Bible, are you seeking to take any specific actions, such as suing the police department or anything of that sort, or are you just going to be looking into whatever investigative process goes into this on the police department's part?
At this moment, we are standing beside the family. That's our focus. In relation to investigation, we're not just going to be following the investigative process of the Seattle Police Department because we have limited faith in their independent investigative process. We would flat out say that it's not independent, and ultimately, you could get me going on this. It's just a little bit fake. It's not transparent at all. It is fake. It is fraudulent. It is not worthy of evaluation at this stage. It is window dressing at its worst. I can't call it best because window dressing can never be good. Their transparency is awful, so we will be investigating this too. We will be evaluating the information that's present, and we'll recognize that on many levels the information that we gather from them we should be highly suspicious of. So we'll be conducting our own independent investigation. That's why we've mentioned that we're hiring an investigation firm in relation to this case, and why we're going to seek to question witnesses, and we talked about the information that we seek to preserve. Now, if the county elects to have an inquest hearing this particular case, we will represent the family, and we'll ask all witnesses very pointed questions, review all evidence, and interview as many people as we can in reference to this matter.
James, could you go over again what you think happened, the scenario of when the officers approached and when he went ducked down or went into the car? What step by step, what do you think happened?
Absolutely. First, I would say this. This isn't an issue of speculation, so it's not a matter of what I think happened at this stage. It would be a review of the video. I've reviewed it hundreds of times, and I think that the audio is mistelling. You can evaluate, and I've also had other experts review the video as well at this stage. And what I can tell you is that the reason why I think there's concern in reference to what happened at that car is because you have a person between the height of 6'2" and 6'4" facing the car within approximately a foot. And you can go home and try it for yourself. I think you might be about 6'2", right? Stand a foot from a car and then have somebody scream at you with a gun to get down and see how you do it, right? And that's where I think the failure in the process absolutely occurred, because they didn't ask him to step back slowly. They didn't ask him to turn around. They didn't ask him anything like that. So they created their own conundrum. He actually followed their requests, and everybody can simply hear that he followed their requests via the audio, and then a second officer unloaded with what is tantamount to a machine gun. And that's essentially what happened. You can hear it, you can hear the get down, and you can see the action. Inevitably, it's going to appear to be a particular way.
So you're saying he could not physically get in the car or get down because of his height and the car blocking him?
Okay, if I'm standing right here, which I am, I guess that's not a hypothetical, and I'm this close, and you tell me to get down, what am I going to do?
The car's where?
Car's right, this is the car,
Okay.
right?
You're saying you
Now imagine it's right here.
Right.
Do I hit myself in the face? This is simple. This is easy. The police department knows this. They have all kinds of reconstructionists. That's what makes this ultimately silly. Ultimately silly. I will say, what's also silly is that to this point, I haven't heard anybody in the media actually challenge the idea in relation to what should actually have occurred in terms of police best practices. Should they have told him to step back? Nobody's asked, has anybody asked that question of law enforcement? What about that step? Did you, sir?
I'm trying to get answers.
Okay. And where are you from? The stranger? So I'm hopeful that somebody will answer the stranger's question, you know, because it's actually an important one that's actually rational. How come he wasn't asked to step back? How come the claim is that he leaned forward? They created their own conundrum. They shot somebody to death, and now they've been trying to control the message ever since, while pretending that they are actually assisting the community with the harm that was caused. Any other questions?
Can someone speak to who Shay was as a person? Someone mentioned he had kids, you know, he's married. What did he do with his time?
Ask his mother. Ask his mother.
James, can you let them on?
Absolutely.
You want to take it?
Would you like to? Okay.
I'm Shay's sister. My name is Davita Briscoe. So let me first start off by saying Shay Taylor was a man, not a convicted felon. Everything else a criminal. Everything else that the media has tried to demonize him to be. Shay was a man. He was my brother. He was someone's son. He was an uncle. He was a family member. He was a cousin. He was a father. Those are the things that we know Shay as being. Shay was loving, he was caring, he was sensitive. He spent his time with his family. We had birthday parties. I have pictures of my brother coming to my daughter's birthday parties and skating with them. That's the type of Shay, promising my 4 little girls to buy them Barbie dolls, that he would bring them a Barbie doll. That's who Shay was. He was a warm person that could light up any room. He was witty and he was funny.
Yes.
He could tell a story and have you cracking up laughing all day long. I know my brother spent time in prison, and I spent time went to every prison that he's ever been to. I've spent time with him, visiting him for 22 years because I love him and he loves his family. He protected us, he would stand up for us, and he was in our corner, and he would have our back and we would have his. He worked for Amazon in a warehouse, and he received a regular check. That's what he did with his life. People don't know that, but we have pictures of him with his hard hat on at work. We have those pictures. We have pictures of my brother being a family man and an uncle and a father. So that's who Shay was. That's who Shay was. He brought life to us. He was our life. And the day my brother died, not only was I outraged, but I'm angry. I'm angry. I'm deeply hurt. I'm disgusted. I saw my brother be gunned down like an animal. Actually, this country treats animals better than they treat black men.
That's right.
They'll stop traffic to save an animal, but gun our men down like they're dogs. Worse than dogs, actually. But that's what my brother has been criminalized. I've seen all type of news reports that he doesn't deserve. Pretty much he's guilty of his own murder. That's the way that the media has painted him. Never calling him a man. Never calling him a man. Even making us sit outside the hospital for over 2.5 hours. Not even allowing us to come into the hospital. Not even his wife called the police on us and said we were causing a disturbance. The Seattle Police Department took over the whole, they wouldn't even announce his death until after 4 hours and wouldn't have not allowed us to see his body. Took his body to the medical examiner before we could even identify him. Before we could identify his body, they took his body. We got to Harborview, they wouldn't allow us into the hospital and told us that we had to call the Seattle Police Department to give immediate family names to the hospital in order to be entered into. Made us sit in our cars. Wouldn't give us a hospital room, a family room to sit in, nothing. The only 2 people that the hospital would let in was his wife and me, and that was over 2.5 hours later. And they still didn't let us see his body. They told us that his body wasn't there. It's a cover-up. It's a cover-up.
As it has been many times before.
Many times before. My brother was shot in his back while he was following their commands. He was doing exactly, so that's a conflicting story, that he wasn't following commands, because what we see on the video is him following commands.
That was their first story.
That was their first story. Now the second story is he was reaching for a gun. But we don't see anything on the tape where they're, okay, I'm sorry, but I'm just angry.
Other questions?
Do you have any message for the Department of Justice, which has been in Seattle for several years now?
Great question. Great question.
No, I could actually listen to you talk all day. Absolutely. I really could.
As I think you know, President Obama invited the chief to the State of the Union address.
Don't even go down that road, man.
Officials are saying that SB is a model for reform all across the country. What response do any of you have to that?
First, I'll say this. Our system of justice in Seattle and across this nation is inherently flawed. It's inherently flawed because of institutional inequities that are allowed to persist, allowed to remain. At this stage, as I've said before, there still remains an illusion of justice in the city of Seattle and towns like it. That illusion of justice is not only in Seattle, but it's also in Tukwila, Redmond, Renton, and all surrounding areas. There is almost no recourse when it comes to police brutality in this nation. And it's time for that to change. The fact that anybody believed that the Department of Justice could change anything here